Some of you might have come to last time, so this is a bit of a repetition, but for those of you who don't know who we are, we're the London Communities Emergencies Partnership, LSEP for short, because that's a bit of a mouthful. And we've existed for a couple of years now, but we are here to strengthen preparedness of voluntary and community sector organisations in London. And we do this through building trusted relationships and also sharing knowledge and insight to partners. Next slide, please. And so yeah, that's it. So we are jointly run by two charities. So one is London Plus, and they run different networks in London. So a volunteer centre network and a CVS network, so Council for Voluntary Services. So they have really good connections across London. We run in a network of network type model, and they know the London charity and community sector very well. And then our other partner, the VCSEP, so the Voluntary and Community Sector Emergencies Partnership, they came out of the 2017 emergencies, so Grenfell, Manchester Arena, and London terror attacks. And they were initially made up of the national emergency response charities you think of when you think of emergency response, so British Red Cross or Salvation Army. And their network and partnership is much broader now, but they have the expertise of community resilience and emergency response. And so by joining the two charities together, we're able to draw on the different strengths of both of those charities. And we work in partnership there's lots of people doing community resilience in London now, which is really brilliant, including Communities Prepared, who we're working with today. And so we draw on the strength from everybody's different skills, such as equalities or resilience across London. Next slide, please. So we support charities and community groups in London to prepare for, coordinate during, and learn from major emergencies. And we do this by running quarterly partnership meetings. We run various capability projects or exercises to practice ahead of emergencies. We sit on the London Resilience Forum as a representative for the voluntary and community sector. We're really passionate about bringing in lived experience and voice of the voluntary sector to that multi-agency forum. And we learn from previous emergencies to ensure that as a sector and a lot wider London community that we are prepared for whatever emergencies we might face. And is there one more slide, please? Thank you. And as I mentioned, the preparedness across London for voluntary community sector is really linked together, and all the different networks that are running and that you might be part of are coordinated, and we support that to make sure that there's no duplication and that we're all learning from each other and using each other's skills and networks. And an example is our partnership today with Communities Prepared delivering this. And I really recommend, I'll put links in the chat, but I encourage you all to sign up to, we share as much information as we can about funding opportunities or events or training opportunities. And we are passionate about any type of voluntary or community organisation being a partner of LSEP. So if you wanted to chat after this, or if you wanted to sign up, then please do, and I'll put all of my information in the chat. But now I will pass over to Fwelen for the next part of this meeting.
Yes, thank you, Emily, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's call. I hope you can all hear me fine. So just to reiterate, and for those who came to the first session of this webinar series, sorry if it's a repeat. So this is a initiative that is part of the London Resilience Committee's program, a wider program. And the overall goal of this London Resilience Committee's program is, as stated on the slides, to make London's diverse communities more resilient in the face of emergencies through development of community emergency plans and also establishments of community resilience hubs. So there are many components to this program. I'm not going to go into too much details, but you can definitely go and check out the webpage for this. I'm going to intend to copy the link in the chat. And obviously, if you haven't signed up for it, please do, because there is a lot of free resources you can access through this website. So let me just access the chat briefly and just put the link in so you can have access to it in your own time. So through that program, like I said, there's a lot of different resources you can find on the webpage. So we have these webinars that are free webinars running monthly until until August. But there's also a lot of other free online resources that will be posted as part of this program. So please go and sign up today, really, if you haven't. Here is just a recap of our webinar series. So we already had the session 1 in January, understanding the London resilience context. We have recorded the session, so you can find it on the webpage. And today we are doing the second session of this webinar series, which is called Prepare, Identifying Local Strengths to Build a Strong Foundation for Resilience. So welcome for making it into the call today. Also, one strong resource that is really part of this program that I want to flag today is the London Community Resilience Toolkit, and you can access it for free on a slightly different link. So I'm also going to make sure I post that in the chat so you can access it as well, because it's a great resource that can help you, especially develop a community emergency plan. And so it has different parts that you can find on that web page that are linked in the chats, where you can find information, you can find guidance, checklists, steps of what you can do to develop your own community emergency plan. It has templates, it has useful links. So please go and have a look at it in your own time, because it's very useful and it's free. But today we are here for session 2 of the London Resilient Communities webinar, which is about identifying local strengths to build a strong foundation for resilience. So there are these several learning outcomes for our session today. So we should be finishing around 2 p.m. and there's going to be, as Emily mentioned, some time allocated at the end to try and answer some questions. So please post in the chat and we'll have a look at the themes that are coming out and we'll try to select what we can select for that these few minutes that we allocate to the questions at the end. So our aims or our learning outcomes are to explain what makes an effective community resilient network, in our opinion. And we also have a guest speaker coming to show us a bit more of a practical example of how it works, but not in London. So that could be really useful input for us to consider when we think about the London communities. Hopefully you have a bit of an idea of how to map stakeholder. We'll also try to identify some barriers to engagement of our communities with resilience. And also we'll think about how to map community assets. We'll do that through 3 main sections today. So we'll go through these sections. First, what makes an effective resilient network? Then we'll think a bit about the barriers to engagement, and then we'll end up with some sort of practical tips on how to do or start an asset map for your community. So without further ado, let's start with what makes an effective resilient network. And so we're going to start actually by answering a poll for you guys. So Emily, if you don't mind launching our first poll, that'd be great. And what I suggest is that you share with that poll the answer to this question. In past emergencies or disruptions, so within your experience or within what you've heard maybe from emergencies and disruptions in general, what made or what do you think could make the biggest difference locally, so for the community to stay safe during that? So we've suggested some answers that you can take, and it might be that you have a different idea. We haven't populated it with too many options, but you've got the options of something else at the end. If you want to share in the chat as well, what that something else might be, if you think it's not really mentioned in our poll, that's brilliant as well. Thank you. And if we can also all have a look on the screen, we should be able to see the entries for that poll. We can comment on it. So I'll give you a few minutes to have a look, to think about it, and to share on the poll. So far, we can already see that a lot of it seems to be around sharing information so accurately and quickly when it's needed in a community, and also who knows who. So it seems that relationships and how you get the information across really often is what matters the most. So I'll give you another minute or two. And if my colleague can also have a monitoring of the chat happening after that, so that we don't miss anything while we keep on moving with the rest of the presentation. But also we have one on some volunteers stepping up. So, having that asset of volunteers and knowing how to address the volunteers coming in when they want to help is something to consider as well as a good strength for your foundation to resilience in your community. Okay, so I don't see much more activity in that poll. So if everybody, so we've got about 64% of taking part in the poll. So maybe we can leave it for another minute or two, and then Emily, if you want to just end the poll when that seems to have sort of calmed down and nobody is sharing in there. But I'm going to keep going with our slides. Feel free to keep talking through the poll or in the chat if you want, or if you have any questions. So thinking about what makes a good resilience network or a strong resilience network, here is a sort of attempt to a definition for you that is on the screen. So when we talk about a resilience network, we are not really just talking about the emergency response group or the formal partnership structure around emergencies and response. A resilience network is actually a web of relationships that are between people and organizations and institutions, and they can all coordinate together before, during, and after disruptions. So it will also include the formal actors you can think about, like the council and emergency services, but also really informal community leaders that are in your communities, or faith groups, local businesses, volunteers, and any sort of trusted connectors to these different components of your community, and that can give you access to everyone, and include everyone in your community. So really important to keep that in mind. And also importantly, it's not event-based, so it is ongoing. So the strength of a resilience network isn't also measured by its size, really, the size of its contact lists, if you like. It is measured by the quality of relationship, the ability that everyone has to mobilize when it matters most to your community. Yeah, that's a little thinking behind how you can implement this in your communities. The next slide is to show you our suggestion on 5 pillars of an effective resilience network. So it's what we believe to be the important features for a network to function better, under pressure of these incidents that can happen. So first, the trust. Trust will reduce frictions, and when people already know and respect each other, decisions actually can be made faster, can move faster. So we want that trust to be built ideally before a crisis is actually happening. And it is really based on, the network is really based on mutual respect. So it's important to consider, informal connections as well as formal connections within your community, because that trust is so important and often really established as well in informal connections in your community. So, hopefully trust will help reduce the friction during the response to an incident as well as before or after. And it's important to keep that in mind in the context of London communities because it can often be a hidden strength in big cities like London, for example. Uh, Also, clarity of the role is an important feature. Who is assembling the people, who is communicating, and that reflected in the poll actually that we had on. Who support the vulnerable residents, for example. So with that clarity, you might end up sort of duplicating the efforts, or you might actually miss some gaps, some important gaps sometimes. And third, we also talk about the strong communication channels. So they have to be two ways. So not only, pushing updates out from the community, but also receiving and listening to what's happening on the ground. Um, Diversity and inclusion. So networks that reflect the whole community are obviously far more adaptive and responsive. So it is really about having clear, simple communication pathways and you can use pathways that exist already. So WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, known email lists, phone trees, whatever is existing already in your community. And it can be also in-person existing meetups or events that are actually well attended in your community already. Finally, shared purpose. So a network needs um, to be more than just sharing a geographical area. It needs to actually have a clear reason to exist that all the actors have benefits for and positive outcome from. So that shared purpose need to be found in your network and defined as well before crises happen. So before we hear a bit of more practical ways you can implement a strong resilient network, it can also help when you try to define what that network needs to look like to think about what a strong resilience network isn't. So we've got a bit of a myth busting sort of slide here. So is resilience about emergency plans? Well, yes, it is, but not only. It's really about relationships and also everyday capacity of your community. Second myth, maybe, is the bigger the networks, the stronger it is. Well, that, as we said already, not necessarily. Actually, a strong network is a network that have good connections and good coordination. So strong networks are connected and coordinated, not necessarily bigger. And the last one, resilience sits with the council. Again, it's not the only actor in the scene of resilience to emergencies. The roles are actually distributed across the communities, across the whole community. So the community has its role as well. Um, so I'm aware that this is all very theoretical and uh, that can also sometimes feel a bit dry. So we have the chance to have a guest coming to speak with you, and that can be agreed to share her experience in community resilience, and that hopefully will help illustrate, the importance of a strong network foundation. So, so let me introduce you to Sulafa Abusho, who is the strategic policy lead for whole of society resilience in the Greater Manchester Resilience Unit, and she focuses on strengthening how organizations and communities work together before, during, and after emergency, helping to connect local authorities, emergency services, and community organizations. So people are better prepared and better supported when a challenge is arising. So she actually brings over 15 years experience in the voluntary community faith and social enterprise sector. And it really shapes her practical community focused approach to resilience. So thank you very much, Sulafa, for joining us today. And over to you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me, and thanks for Jessie's message, giving me a little boost before before I start speaking in the chat. So I'm Zulafa Abushal. I work for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I'm in a new role at the moment, which is that strategic policy lead for whole of society resilience, which probably sounds grander than it actually is. But prior to that, I was working on behalf of the Greater Manchester Resilience Forum as the BCFSC programme manager. So looking at that connection between voluntary community faith and social enterprise sector with everything that we do around emergency planning in Greater Manchester. As it says on the slide, I've worked in the voluntary sector for a really long time before coming to the public sector. So I've done lots of different roles around homelessness, community development, mental health, worked with older people for a little while around a loneliness project, and even worked in conservation for a while, which was my absolute favourite job before coming into this without really knowing what I was getting into. But it's been a super interesting job. And I'm going to share with you a little bit what we do in Manchester, around Greater Manchester in this space. So firstly, I do work on behalf of the Greater Manchester Resilience Forum. So that's kind of a strategic partnership that's involved in everything to do with emergency preparedness, response and recovery. And that brings together partners from all sorts of emergency responders, but also utilities companies, local authorities, health, but also voluntary sector partners. So part of my work is looking at how we can engage with some of those crisis response organisations that Emily was talking around, like British Red Cross, Islamic Relief, Mountain Rescue, Samaritans, those kind of typical crisis response organisations. So how do we bring them into the world of emergency planning and make sure that emergency responders and those that are involved in everything to do with emergency response are aware of the capabilities of the voluntary sector? So that's kind of one angle of our work, and we do lots of training and exercising with those organisations to make sure we can integrate them into how we respond to emergencies. The other side to the work is more around kind of our local response and community preparedness and working with the wider voluntary sector across Greater Manchester. So we're not quite as big as London. We've got 10 boroughs. I think at the last count, although it's probably gone up actually, because I think this count was done a little while ago, but we had over 17,000 BCFSC organisations across Greater Manchester. So it's quite tricky for me as one person to engage with all of those organisations, and I absolutely don't think that I need to. But what we try and do is take a bit of a networks approach and try and build some of those relationships really locally with our local infrastructure organisations. So in each of our boroughs, we've got one voluntary sector organisation, which is the local infrastructure organisation, that we try and make sure there's a relationship between them and the emergency planning department of the local authority in that particular area. We do that to make sure that there is that connection between the wider community and the wider BCFSC sector in each borough and all things emergency planning. So that includes kind of bringing in local knowledge. That includes bringing in understanding of diverse community needs. That includes kind of looking at particular aspects of risk in that community that the local authority might not have those kind of channels into. We also try and make sure that the local infrastructure organisation has sort of training and awareness of how to coordinate and respond to an emergency. That being said, a lot of the partners that we have worked with across our 10 boroughs have got really great experience and would absolutely always mobilise if anything kind of happened in there. We've seen that during COVID, and we've had many different kind of incidents that have happened across Greater Manchester, and our BCFSC sector partners have always stepped up. The difference that we're trying to make is put a little bit of supportive framework around that to make sure that they're connected in with the local authorities if they need that additional support. And so there's that open channel of communication, there's that relationship in place before anything happens, and there's that opportunity to feed insider information both ways, which is an essential part of it. So we try and provide that little bit of support, say, well, you're doing this already, you would absolutely be involved, but how do we kind of support you and put a framework around it to make sure it's kind of integrated into the response and provides better outcomes for the community. So we do a lot of work in that relationship building space. So we offer a little bit of training to local infrastructure organisations, as I said. We also offer out wider training to the BCFSC sector as a whole. So we do generic training around specific risks that we have in Greater Manchester. For those that you visited will know that it rains a lot here. So we do winter specific risks around kind of flooding. What do you need to know? What's useful for you to sign up to? How might you support those that might be disproportionately impacted in your community? What's your role as a voluntary sector organisation? What would happen, for example, if people were evacuated locally and they might need to utilise your building, and put a little bit of framework around them for that. So we offer training, as I said, specifically to the local infrastructure organisations as a bit of a network of networks body, Then we offer training to VCFSE, more hyperlocal organisations, to try and make sure they understand their role. But what we do is make sure that they're connected in with a local infrastructure organisation, again, to make sure there's that link. So if something is coming up in a particular borough, it's that information sharing, that awareness picture, and also linking into a localised response. So we try and build that pathway up. And then for community members directly, again, we offer some of that open training. We've got a public-facing community risk register, although I'm not sure unless you were super interested in this area, you'd go out searching for. But if you were really interested in kind of finding out your specific risks and what actions you could take, then that's absolutely there. And we direct people to the government prepared website as well. So we've got a few different areas that we're working in. I suppose in terms of the actual work that we do around preparedness information and community facing work as well, we've developed a few bespoke resources. So we've got a specific person in our team who works around the intersection between ageing and resilience and looks at how we support older people and organisations supporting older people to be more prepared in whatever circumstances it may be. And we're trying to take that approach of really understanding, working with older people and older people's organisations that support older people to kind of understand what's different about the messaging that we need to provide to them. So thinking about the things around trust and relationships. So what difference does it make around the messages people are being given, who they're being given it to? Do organisations supporting older people understand their specific roles and how to get information out, and what they should do in a particular event? We look at kind of that messaging. So we're trying to work with older people to develop material specifically for older people, so that message is coming out from older people directly, but also working with things like primary care trusts. So looking at GPs, district nurses, can we use pharmacies to get that message out? And we try and take that approach again to make sure that we're meeting the differential needs in our community. And we're going to look at different communities of identity and take that approach as well, so that if we're talking to a particular community, the message is being delivered in a way about risk that they really need to hear it in and that would inspire action. So there's lots of things kind of happening around that space that we're particularly interested in. I just want to mention quickly some work that we've been doing. That's just generally speaking what we do, but in practice, I'm sure everyone was aware of the recent attack that we had on the synagogue. So it was last year, actually now in Manchester, the terrorist attack that we had in the synagogue in Heaton Park. And that's when all these things that we put into practice around relationships, around communications, around that kind of activation practice came into play. During that response, we involved 3 of our local infrastructure organisations who supported, in particular, the Jewish community in the boroughs that were impacted by the incident. We involved them in kind of the response, but more widely into that recovery, which is still ongoing at the moment. They were our conduit into the community. They were able to reach into faith and belief networks, make sure that messages of reassurance were going out, but also feeding in messages of concern from particular community members into that response and recovery, and make sure it was part of the considerations that we were doing and taken into account. Now, that local infrastructure organisation, those 3 were also our pathway into the wider community organisation, so looking at who else was supporting particular community members that were impacted. And it was the first time that we've really seen that integration of not just crisis response organisations. We certainly work with British Red Cross and Islamic Relief as part of that response, but looking at what the role is actually of just everyday groups that are already working with communities that have been impacted, either directly because they're a member of that community or actually just because they live in that local area. There's a lot of learning for us to do as part of that project, and we are running a debrief on that. So a big part of the way that we work is about how we kind of understand how we've responded, what could have looked different, what would have meant the impact on that community was slightly different, and hopefully feed that into future responses. So we're constantly learning. That being said, no response is exactly the same, and that looks very different, and we're constantly being challenged. Again, I'm sure you saw in the news we had a potential attack on a mosque again in central Manchester, and those threats are coming through all the time. But I think what we're trying to do is get better at putting messaging out. So again, with the attack, the potential attack on the mosque, we put out messages through our faith and belief panels. We reached out into individual interfaith networks, into the communities, to try and offer some of that reassurance, but make sure that two-way pathway was in place. we're constantly working on it and we're constantly learning. But I think for us, and my role is really absolutely pushing the value of engaging with BCFSE partners throughout the work that we do, and constantly making sure they're engaged and involved in the work. And some of that includes, looking for funding, looking for resources, looking for tools, and having things like, we talked about the London Communities Toolkit there, just a little bit of kind of that framework to support you to engage in this work, I think has been really helpful. So we're looking at that space a little bit more in Greater Manchester. I'm not sure how long I've been talking for now, so I think I'm just going to stop there for a second. See, there's a question in the chat, and I pick that up as we're going on.
Thank you so much, Sula, for that. That was really informative, and hopefully it was really useful for everyone today. We can come back to questions later, or feel free if you want, Sula, to directly answer in the chat as well. That's fine. I will keep going with the rest of our content. But thank you so much. So I think this leads quite nicely into our next section of today's webinar, which is talking a bit about barriers to engagement and the impact that it can have on resilience. So I've got one slide to share on that with you. So it is there. So this is a sort of our attempt to summarize what we think being common barriers communities face in engaging with, resilience in communities. So it has 6 key points. And so we've got these different columns here. The columns are going to show a barrier that we are highlighting, and then the impact that it can have, and some practical ways to maybe try and address this barrier. So we can go through these 6 lines together. So we've got committing priorities first. So people often, have more immediate pressures. So things like cost of living or health problems or caring responsibilities. And this can sometimes reduce their participation in these resilience activities in the community. So one approach is to try and embed resilience into existing activities that people are already doing, for example, and also to link actions to everyday benefits, like safety, health, cost savings, and this kind of things. Then we've got engagement gaps. So, for example, low awareness of local climate risks, or limited inclusions of different voices, and that can actually lead to unequal outcomes for different people in the community. So you can address this by working with trusted local connectors. We've already mentioned that before, and sharing information as much as you can that is really locally relevant and very accessible to everyone. Then we've got climate fatigue. So sometimes climate change feels, for some people, or for a lot of people, feels quite overwhelming, in fact, and maybe a bit too abstract in some cases as well for some people to integrate. So that can really cause disengagement in the community. So a practical approach is to try and focus on tangible local actions that people can really see, can really experience, and hopefully this can help building confidence and motivation throughout the community on this topic. Then we've got weak trust sometimes existing within the community network. So there might be limited trust between organizations and community members themselves. So that can sometimes really slow coordinations when you're trying to establish that strategy to be more resilient. So what's important is to keep in mind to always invest in relationships, and it needs to be happening before a crisis. And also it's important to always be transparent and consistent in the communication that you're using. So it will really help strengthen collaboration that way. Unclear role is also a problem. Unclear roles is also a problem. So if you're not quite sure who convenes, who coordinates, there's going to be confusion. And sometimes there might be also duplication of what's happening around or what occurs in the community. So it's quite important to really agree simple roles and simple communication protocols. so that you can really so if that's done actually early enough as well, it can really make your networks much more effective. So the last one is fragmented systems. So that's referring to really what siloed working and short-term funding brings to these networks sometimes, and how this can weaken the network that you're trying to really establish in a community. So it can make your network a bit more fragile. So again, it's about strengthening cross-sector collaboration, as we've actually really heard from Sulafa as well, and aligning, the resilience work with the existing strategies that are already out there, and that we can help build continuity and stronger foundation for your community's action. So yeah, so these are the main barriers that can hold communities back sometimes, but obviously we can always have a go at trying to address them with these practical actions that I've mentioned. And what we're going to explore actually in the next section now is asset mapping, and it will help find the resources, find the relationship, the skills that are present in your community that can really help further build that strength in your network. So asset mapping, understanding the strength. First, what really is asset mapping, or what is it based on? So asset mapping focuses on what community already has, really. So it's important to have a strength-based approach. It's not really about highlighting all the needs. It should actually be a positive experience where we celebrate the community, celebrate what it has to offer, rather than really highlighting all the problems in the community. So obviously it doesn't mean that you ignore the problems that you're facing within your community. It just means that you are actually focusing on the positives so that you can address that bigger issue. So you really need to start thinking about assets, not really problems. It is also about visibility and usability. So an asset is not going to be very useful if you can't find it or if you can't reach for that asset. So it's important to, through your asset mapping, to make the assets in your community visible. And so that means that asset mapping is also really about relationships. So you can actually make these assets visible. And it's ongoing and collaborative. And we've also heard Sulafa mentioning about the fact that it's they're always learning about how they approach all of these issues in their communities up in Manchester as well. So asset mapping is never really finished, and it shouldn't really be done alone at all. If you are today thinking of building your own asset map in your community, remember that today is not really is only the starting point, okay? And then you will be able to improve it through conversations and building your network and speaking to people that can be engaged in your initiative to make your community more resilient. So what kind of assets do you want to think about when you're starting asset mapping? So it's really multifaceted, and it's about a wide range of services, and especially not only formal services, formal organization. So we've got here a few categories that you can think about of what kind of asset you might want to look for. And this is not exhaustive, and you may have different kind of assets as well, but these are sort of the most common ones. So assets will include people and skills, organizations or groups or trusted networks that you have. And it's important to remember again how relationships are so important in asset mapping. Also, you'll have physical resources and equipment, but also buildings and spaces that can be mobilized during emergencies. Then you've got information or access to information and communication channels that are used in your area, but also local businesses. So, businesses can have a lot of assets themselves. So they having maybe equipment and buildings, but they also have, capacity to stock things, they have distribution links, they have staff capacity. So, we highly recommend to work with businesses or connect with your businesses, so that, you can have access to wider systems, maybe through businesses as well. And also, again, remember that assets don't have to be formal to be significant. So think about your informal champions or informal leaders in your community, but also networks, people that have significant lived experience or significant knowledge about your community, and also everyday skills. And we'll talk a bit more about skills in next few slides as well. That these skills that can be really, really useful during emergencies. But so really assets will in fact include everything and anything as long as it is supporting your community. So that's why I'm saying this is not an exhaustive list. It's what matters in your community as well. Okay, so when you are going to be doing your map, when you're going to if you are thinking of doing a map of your assets, you want to start maybe listing your community partners. These are sort of key elements to keep in mind when you are going to be doing your community partners list, if you like, or directory. And as a reminder, we've got the link at the bottom of our toolkit that I shared already in the chat, because there's templates to do that in there, so you can use it to help. But partner includes formal and informal groups, as we said, trusted connectors. During emergencies, existing relationships often are stronger than new ones, and that's because they're based on trust. So remember about that. And asset mapping is about who you work already with, and how can they help. So the list that you'll end up with shouldn't really be seen. I know I use the word directory, but it shouldn't really be seen as a directory, more like a relationship map. And we said mapping your assets is based on strengths, but asset mapping is also, in the meantime, about identifying gaps. And today is the beginning. You might find that you have some gaps, and that's fine. Your list can be ongoing, and you might be able to complete it or not complete it. It's never really finished, but you can keep, building that map, over your work with these different partners, and finding out other partners that you may not have thought about. So one more thing to think about when you're doing your mapping, and hopefully that's going to be the last sort of point we do on that one, is existing skills in your community. And you want to think about these skills and how they can really help across the emergency cycle, which has these three important phases that I'm sure you're familiar with. Prepare, which is before something happens. Respond, which is during an incident. So we're thinking maybe around 24, 78, 72 hours around when an incident is live. But also during the recovery phase, which is after the crisis. But, it's not really a rigid way to divide these phases, okay? Each emergency might be sort of a bit individual in its own way, but you need to think about skills across that cycle. And these are just a few examples or suggestions. It's not an exhaustive list again, but so it's not the correct answer, and you might have a totally different set of skills in your community, and that wouldn't be wrong. These are maybe just a good starting point or good beautiful thoughts for you. In terms of preparing for emergencies, risk awareness is a good thing to think about. You may have people that understand well local risks, for example. Local knowledge as well, as we said, people with local knowledge is great. People that have capacity to build good community engagement or build some good trust. Obviously, people that can coordinate the volunteer sector or a pool of volunteers is a great skill to think about in preparedness mode, but also how you plan around your communication, and partnership building also is one of those. Then during an incident, when you think about the response that your community can help with, basic skills like first aid, uh, people that are able to think about safeguarding aspects when people are going to be involved in that more sort of response phase. Again, clear communication skills, having access to information that is accurate and being able to share it. Uh, don't underestimate as well that information piece and the fact that having good translator or interpreters around your community is crucial for that, for making sure that you are really speaking and involving everyone in your community. People able to go and do some welfare checks around, and people that can really rapidly make decisions around what needs to be done. So that's all around the response phase. In terms of the recovery phase, you can think of skills like emotional support, help people being heard, so advocacy of your people, thinking of the services that people might have access to in recovery, giving access or helping people find the right way to access those, but also how can you fundraise for the community and listen to the community, and also how can you restore, the functions or restore the stability in your community in the recovery phase. So also a little note at the bottom, which is to consider training needs when you think about skills and policies around these skills or policies around planning around these emergencies on GDPR, licensing, insurance, safeguarding that we mentioned already. So here are just a few ways you can think of uncovering skills, or with small sort of tips. Think of doing sort of surveys, and they can be in different forms. Maybe go to existing spaces where community events happen regularly and are attended, and you know that they're attended. You can also just create a simple sign-up sheet, and don't underestimate informal conversations, because often leaders might already know who can do what in their organization. So it might just not be written down anywhere, but you can just find out these things while you speak with your partners. Also, partner organization, local business often hold skills and resources, so definitely a good place to go again. And also don't underestimate all of the sort of layers of your community. So young people, older people can be sometimes overlooked. So you can also go out there to find out their skill. And also sometimes it also is the way that you're asking. So rather than maybe asking a sort of maybe formal, scarier question that is, oh, what are your skills? Maybe you can ask it in a different way, like, what do you enjoy doing, for example? And it can sometimes reveal some hidden capacity there. So these are a few bits of advice. I am about to finish. So this is our last slide on final thoughts that summarize our 3 sections today. While strong resilience network grow from existing relationship, trust and shared purpose. Engagement, as we found out, is weakened by different things like capacity pressures, trust gaps, and fragmented system. But there are ways to remedy this. And asset mapping will really help uncover the strength that are already present, while still understanding gaps, but that will help strengthen your resilience in your community. That's my last slide here with just some links and resources that could be useful. And we're also now going to have our question and answer. I'm going to let Emily guide us through this. And also we have an exit poll that will open for you guys to feedback on today's webinar. But thank you so much, everyone. I'll move on to Emily now.
Thank you very much all. We didn't actually have too many questions in the chat, and the ones we did have been answered, but I can pick them out just in case there's any more to add. So there was one question, which was, would we map as part of developing an emergency plan? So yeah, I don't know if you want to add more of that and more to that. Jessie did reply a bit in the chat.
Okay. So I didn't see what Jessie mentioned. And I'm happy to, if there's further question from what Jessie said, I'm happy to comment and I can have a look at.
Is it Jesse said, I would do the map first and then use that to inform what your plan says and does.
Yeah, so I think typically the way we approach plans in our toolkit is in phases, and asset mapping is really part of that first phase where you try to understand your community. So you could say it's as part of your plan, but it doesn't necessarily need to be visible in your plan because it depends the form that you want your plan to take. But it's very important to, as a basis of developing that plan, that you have that understanding of your community. So I'd say it's almost part of the process of your plan, but yeah, it's really prior to developing the plan and the actions that will be in your plan. So yeah, it's not much to add really, but good question.
Okay. And then there's another question that has come in is, could you create a simple leaflet to be distributed to all households with simple ideas of things you do in an emergency, like if you have capacity to check neighbours in each direction?
Yeah, but also that's a great suggestion. And I think in terms of what a community emergency plan is, this question is a great illustration to how you need to make your plan accessible. And it might be that you develop an emergency team planning group that is going to have a more formal looking like plan that is saved, within their system and that they can pull out when an emergency is arising. But having this much more easy to take in and to understand version of it. So whether it's that really simple flyer, if we know this is how a part of the community or the community is going to be more responsive to, I think that's a great idea. And having these simple actions on the leaflet is what's going to be easy for people and not overwhelming for people to take on. So I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. And there was one more question, but Salafa did answer it. But again, Salafa, if you wanted to add to it, it was around, do you work with cultural institutions in Manchester?
Yeah, just put in the chat. I mean, not at the moment, just purely because we haven't reached out to them, but I think we're open to working with absolutely anybody who would like to work with us. So yeah, always happy to have a conversation about it. I've dropped my email in the chat as well if anybody does want to pick up on any of the points. But I think, yeah, I think there absolutely is a role for every different type of organisation in this space. Everyone's sort of playing a different role in the community. So yeah, always keen to link in with different partners.
Totally agree. Thank you. I think that's it for questions. Yeah, are you happy to draw this to a close, or did anyone have one last minute question at all?
I just want to point out the date for the next webinar, and
Yeah.
I don't know if the poll has been started for the
Oh, yeah,
feedback,
I
so we can give a few minutes for people to leave feedback.
share that
That'd be
now.
great. But next webinar is going to be actually about using emergency plans. So just feel free to sign up. I really highly encourage you to sign up. The link is at the bottom. So that's the link to the program. And we are on a monthly basis regularly posting the registration links for the webinar. So it should be in the next few days posted on there. Or next week, mid next week maybe. So keep an eye on that. And it will be on the 26th of March and 1 to 2 in the afternoon. So it's intended to be always the last Thursday of every month until the August. So yeah, so lovely to see everyone though today. I can also place the link. I'm not sure. I've already put that link, I think, in it's the general page of the London Resilient Community Program webpage. So have a look at that in your own time. I will also send the slides and the recording will be posted on our YouTube. So I'll send the slides to people that came to the webinar today, but the recording will be available on that page as well if you wanted to watch it again and replay some part of it. But yeah, no, thank you. I think Emily, you're welcome to bring us to a close in a minute or two. Nobody else has any question.
Brilliant. Yeah, if everybody could fill out the poll, and just a big thank you to the speakers today. It was really helpful. And I think it was a really interesting session talking about what makes effective resilience networks and also learning from Manchester. And like always, it often comes down to like information sharing, relationship building, how to overcome the barriers. And so, yeah, I think it was a really brilliant session. And thank you everyone for your participation. I'll
Thank
leave
you
the
very
poll
much.
open for a minute, but yeah, please leave when you've done that. Thank you.